One of the things that is very apparent in regenerative agriculture is that no matter where you are on this earth, doesn't matter whether you're on a 100,000-acre ranch in the outback of Australia, 1,000-acre orchard in California, whether you're in a garden in the back of a lot in the city of Minneapolis, or if you even have vegetables in a pot on your deck in New York City, there's 6 principles of a healthy ecosystem that are constant. No matter where you're at, these principles are the same. And we're not 99.9% sure they're the same, we're 100% sure they're the same. Several years ago, those of us at Understanding Ag realized that we were missing perhaps the most important principle. And that one is the principle of context. So often in agriculture today, we are farming and ranching out of context. For instance, look at corn and soybeans. They're growing everywhere now. I can go into central Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Alberta, and they're trying to grow soybeans. That is out of context. There's a reason bananas do not grow in North Dakota, right? We have to farm or ranch in our context. That's called ecological context. We have to talk about our historical ecological context. Wherever you live, there's a little different climate, there's a little different precipitation, humidity, days of sunshine. Those are our ecological context. Now, besides ecological context, we also have financial context. Not all of us were born millionaires. We don't have unlimited money. What's your financial context? That plays a role in how you farm or ranch or grow your garden. What is our family and community, our social context? You know, how many family members are involved? How involved is the community in our farm and ranch and garden? That's a very important part. And then the fourth one is spiritual context. Those who are out on the land working with nature soon realize that it's something greater than ourselves. There's a whole ecosystem that comes into play. What is your spiritual context? So those 4 make up context. We have to take our context into consideration. The second principle is least amount of mechanical and chemical disturbance possible. Where in nature do you see mechanical disturbance? Yes, there's disturbance from earthworms and burrowing animals, but there's not this copious amounts of tillage everywhere. We just don't see that. One of the comparisons I always use for tillage is, look at our garden. What do most people do who have a garden? They go in and rototill it all up. But what are the cascading effects from that? Well, having a negative impact on water infiltration. We're killing mycorrhizal fungi. We're destroying the home for biology. All of those things are negative due to that tillage. Tillage is detrimental. Now, I understand if you have an organic farm or ranch, you're going to do some tillage, but let's minimize those tillage passes. The next principle is armor on the soil, or skin as Ray likes to call it. Nature is always trying to cover the soil. She wants that soil protected from wind erosion, from water erosion, from excess heat, from being too cold. Nature is trying to put that skin on the soil to provide the optimum temperature for soil biology so the plants that are there can grow to their optimum potential. A plant likes soil temperature at approximately 70 degrees. At 70 degrees, 100% of that moisture can be used for plant growth. As soil temperatures start rising, that plant starts shutting down we start losing moisture to evaporation, transpiration. At 100 degrees soil temp, only 15% of that moisture is used for plant growth. What are we in the business of doing? Doesn't matter whether we're a farmer, a rancher, or a gardener, our goal is to take all of this energy out of the atmosphere and pump it into the plant through photosynthesis, pump it into the soil to put more dollars in our pocket. We see these new seedlings emerging. Too early for us to tell what they are, but that really doesn't matter. The importance here is nature is trying to armor the soil. It's trying to put a living root in the soil. It's trying to take that solar energy out of the atmosphere and pump it into the soil.
Correct. Mother Nature's trying to protect herself.
As soil temperatures continue to rise, then that plant starts shutting down. So as we have that skin, that armor on the soil surface, that keeps those temperatures at the optimal state, approximately 70 degrees, and no, of course, not right away in the spring if you've been frozen during the winter. But as soil temps warm up in the heat of the summer or winter, if we're in the southern hemisphere, that armor protects that soil, not only from wind erosion and water erosion, keep temperatures optimum, keep soil moisture at the best it can be in your context. The next principle is diversity. Where in nature do you find a monoculture? Usually only where man or woman put it, right? Nature is very, very diverse. As an example, look at a quote unquote native ecosystem, if there is such thing. Go walk into the forest, walk out onto a prairie. What are you going to observe? You're going to observe a wide array of different plant types, species, different leaf sizes and shapes. All that diversity is there for a reason. We've removed that in our farming, ranching, and gardening today. We plant monoculture. That's not the way nature operates. Take a look at the work Tillman did, University of Minnesota. Species diversity, plant biomass. As we increase the species diversity in our mixes, we're going to have more plant biomass. As we increase the species diversity in the ecosystem, in a particular field or pasture or garden, we're going to have more plant biomass. As we increase functional diversity, in other words, grasses, forbs, legumes, trees, shrubs, we increase biomass production. So often in production agriculture, we think we have to grow a monoculture. That's all we can grow for profitable production. Take a look at what we're standing in here. This is corn planted at the same population as if you were going to solid seed, but look what they've done. They've skipped 2 rows and planted this very diverse cover crop mix. Now think of all the positive effects that are happening. This corn is able to get more sunlight down to its leaves. With that, it's going to be much healthier. We're going to have very profitable yields. This cover crop is collecting more solar energy. We have more leaf area, sizes, and shapes. We're improving that photosynthetic activity. Through mycorrhizal fungi, the roots of, for instance, this hybrid pearl millet plant or the legumes that are in here are able to feed nutrients, including water, to the corn plant, thus benefiting all species. We're feeding more biology in the soil. We're driving the nutrient cycle. We're going to be able to feed more livestock. It's a win-win situation, putting more dollars in our pocket. The next principle is living root in the soil as long as possible throughout the year. And obviously, we check that one off because there is something growing from right away in the spring up until snow flies in late fall, early winter. Farming, ranching, gardening today, what happens? We plant a crop, we harvest that crop, and then the land sits idle. We're not taking all of that energy out of the atmosphere, putting it into the soil where it can be cycled via biology.
The plant is harvesting sunlight through photosynthesis, turning that photosynthesis into carbon. All those hair roots we were talking about, miles and miles and miles of them, are feeding carbon back to the soil microbiology. If we would take this root and we would get this underneath the microscope, we would find microorganisms all feeding all along this root itself.
Along the rhizosphere.
You know, so what's significant about that? Well, we have mentioned before, it's the microbiology that builds the aggregation. So it takes the bacteria building the micro aggregate, but it takes that fungal building the macro aggregate. So that's the reason why it's very critical to make sure we get the fungal component back in our soils. And I think you and I could both agree, if there's one thing our agricultural soils are missing, they're absolutely missing, is the fungal component.
It is. And it truly goes to show, Shane, that plant and soil are one. We have to have living plants. We need a living plant, which is principle number 5. We need a living plant, a living root in the soil as long as possible throughout the year. The next principle is animal and insect integration. Nature does not function properly without animals. There's a lot of talk today, we need to remove animals from the ecosystem, and we have. Drive through the central United States. You can drive hundreds of miles without seeing a fence, without seeing an animal on the landscape, without seeing insects. Nature's not going to function properly. So often, farmers and ranchers look at killing a pest. For every insect species that's a pest, there's up to 1,700 that are beneficial. It's so often said that we need to remove animals from the landscape. That is one of the worst things we can do if we're trying to have a healthy, functioning ecosystem. Think of all the positive compounding effects that happen. An animal comes, it grazes a plant. Over time, plants have evolved in that tugging action from the animal biting that plant signals that plant to start pumping more root exudates into the soil to feed biology, to drive the nutrient cycle so that plant can regrow. Now, as that animal is grazing, there's an interaction. That animal has a tremendous amount of biology in its gut, all these microorganisms. They then cover this plant. Plus, there's biology on the leaf of this plant. That then is consumed by the animal. It's a positive relationship. If we truly want to mitigate climate change, we need more animals grazing on the landscape, not less. One of the things we often see is people want to buy properties like this. I mean, we have the river just behind us and some beautiful habitat. They think for wildlife, but if we take a closer look what's really happening. Because we don't have the animal impact here, this plant material is not getting down in contact with the soil surface. It's oxidizing. We're losing that nutrients. And then what happens, your plant stand actually becomes thinner, weaker, less nutritious because there's less biology and nutrient cycling. If we truly want to have a healthy, functioning soil ecosystem, we need to use all 6 of these principles in order to work with nature instead of against her. Remember that your farm, your ranch, your garden is a direct reflection of your stewardship.